The following program is brought to you in conjunction with the folks at Grace to All with Paul Gray. Now we bring to you The Agape Guy Show with your host, Lenny Manning.
I'm banking everything on love. I'm banking everything on love.
Hello and welcome to The Agape Guy Show. I'm your host, Lenny Manning. Today I'm going to be talking about another issue that I'd like to reassess and see it through the lens of God's love. I sense the need to talk about some problems with dating relationships between men and women, especially since this is a problem with people who are deconstructing. Some folks who are deconstructing get divorced due to the difficulties of deconstructing. Some of this discussion might be PG-13, so viewer discretion is advised, because this will be about dating and marriage relationships. So let me share some statistics. The number of adults who were single at any given time in the last 1 or 2 centuries was about 8%. Yet in recent years, it's skyrocketed. In the 1990s, it went up to 23%. Then around 2010 to 2012, it went up to 28%. As of December of 2025, it had increased to 31%. And it still seems to be increasing. It's not just the United States either, but it's a problem around the world. The number of adult men considering staying single and considering never marrying has skyrocketed to 57%. The number of people who admit to having a troubled relational attachment syndrome has gone from 23% to 47%. As of right now, 46.4% of U.S. adults are single, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Yet they're probably not permanently single. Some of those folks are divorced and some are widows and widowers. Yet 35% of Gen Z aren't looking for a relationship, according to a Harris poll. 8 in 10 Americans believe that finding the right partner is harder than finding the right job for your life. That's according to a Harris poll. I've heard about this from several people in several videos and interviews about this subject. I've also found some of these statistics on a few websites and from a few articles. Some articles are from census.gov, forbes.com, Pew Research, unmarried.com or unmarried.org, and some are from the various Harris polls. Many people who are deconstructing or left abusive churches are having great difficulty in this area. I'm single and having difficulty too. When many people start deconstructing and getting into a rough church detox, they often end up in divorce. Many who deconstructed can't seem to find reasonable people to marry. The typical church crowd doesn't want to have anything to do with them because they typically consider them to be rebellious against God. Even though that isn't true, they perceive it that way, and thus they refuse to date anyone who's deconstructing. Atheists and agnostics typically think Christians who are reconstructing their beliefs and still believe in God might be too religious. So that usually ends up in a dead end as well. At this current time, many who are deconstructing live a long way away from each other. So there aren't a whole lot of people around who are in that same or similar situation of deconstructing. Unfortunately, many church folks aren't willing to listen to other religious views from people who are deconstructing and reconstructing. So this has caused many types of relational problems with married folks, where one of them is deconstructing. I've seen psychologists say that there are a few reasons why folks remain single and have difficulty finding marriage partners. Usually their early life was overrun with problems such as abuse, bullying, betrayal, and a lack of help in dealing with those problems. So they feel perpetually let down. There are many men in this category, and they've given a name to groups with who have a bit more of extreme views. They call those groups MGTOW. That's an acronym that means Men Going Their Own Way. Some people also call a similar group MGTOW, which is men going their own way without women. Some of those folks can be very resentful. There are many men and women that don't want to marry because it's just too much of a hassle. Many also don't understand the opposite sex, and learning to interact with them is considered too much of a hassle. So people don't even want to try anymore, especially since it usually ends up in heated arguments, hurt feelings, and problems that seem impossible to overcome. So they end up not wanting to have anything to do with the opposite sex. I recently watched a video with a very smart man named Brett Weinstein. Here's what he mentioned. He said both sides have good points that show problems with the other side, yet both sides also have very bad ideas that wreck both sides and make reconciliation nearly impossible. Some of the problems come from the more extreme elements of the feminist movement as well. Some of those extreme views promote ideas that make men seem worthless and that women should go through life without men. Yet those women then sit home wondering why no man wants to date them. Well, if you display harsh words and attitudes, you will likely end up alone or possibly even on a permanent basis. That should be obvious. And men, it goes the same way there too. Men in the MGTOW movement have some harsh ideas as well. They act like 100% of all women are pure evil. They say all women treat men like they're worthless trash, and it causes so many problems that it's too difficult to deal with them at all. So they consider it far too difficult to deal with all the drama, and so they opt out completely. So people who study the trends say that in 20 years, nearly 40 to 50 some odd % of all adults will refuse to date or get married. They will view the opposite sex as completely impossible to deal with, even if it isn't necessarily true. We all have our pros and cons, and we need to learn to adapt and be reasonable with each other. Well, this reminds me of something I heard from a Navajo tribal elder. Some of you might have heard me say that I like to listen to the Navajo elder whose common name is Wally Brown. He mentioned in a YouTube video that in the stories of his ancestors, a similar situation occurred. Something happened when men and women were new to living on the earth. Here's the basics of the story that he told. Many centuries or millennia ago, when men and women were new to living on this world, an argument arose. Here's how the argument went. One day a man got back from hunting and put the dead animal he captured in front of his wife. His wife felt unappreciated and taken for granted, so his wife said, "Do I have my private parts to thank for this food?" The man asked why she said such harsh things like that. She said that the only reason he got food was so he could use her as a toy for his own pleasure and enjoyment. The argument spilled out of their home, and they argued in front of the rest of the tribe. Then other women spoke up in favor of the woman, and the men spoke up for the man. They all argued so much that the men asked if the women thought that they could live on their own without the men. The women said they could get their own food and that they had the abilities to raise crops on their own. So they thought that they could live on their own quite well enough. They all argued so much that they decided to separate themselves and live on different sides of the river. So men were all on one side of the river and the women were all on the other side. A short time later, some women gave birth to 3 boys, and the boys grew up and were very badly behaved. The first boy grew up and would constantly go around stealing food, and he got overweight. It got so bad that his mom couldn't gather enough food, and the boy would sneak into his neighbor's dwelling place and steal their food. No matter what anyone told the child would never stop doing these things. A second child was born who misbehaved sometimes, and if anyone tried to correct him, he started harsh arguments. He would always argue and say harsh things. No matter what people said, he would always just argue. It eventually got to the point that the child was uncontrollable. No one wanted to be around him because he misbehaved so much and would always argue with everybody. A third child was born, and as he grew up, he argued and would then get in fistfights and would kill people. When the others tried to show him that this was not a good way to behave, he would argue even more. Then if people tried to correct him, he would get in fistfights and would try to kill them. These situations got out of control, and no one among the women could handle them or figure out what to do. Sometime later, as the people got up in the morning, they went to the river to scoop up water to drink and to wash themselves. As the men stood on one side of the river and the women on the other, they started to look at each other. They both realized that they wanted to be with each other. Some of them began to cross the river to speak to the others. They told each other that they wanted to be together, and they thought it would be better if they were all together again. Some of them remembered the old arguments they had, and they started to negotiate to resolve those problems. Here's how the negotiations went. Some of the men said that the women should refrain from speaking so harsh and disrespectful to the men. They said that it hurt the men deep inside and made them want to go away, hide, and not interact with the women. That was because the women spoke in such a disrespectful and harsh manner. Then the women spoke up and tried to negotiate from their standpoint. They said that they wanted to be treated better too. They didn't want to be merely a toy that men used to give themselves pleasure. They wanted to be treated as a human who is smart and capable of doing things. They also said that they wanted to be cherished as a person and not treated as an object. As the negotiations continued, the men mentioned that they tried hard to supply food and other things for the family. The women mentioned that they appreciated that the men got food and other things. Yet the women felt like they were taken advantage of and taken for granted. They felt like they were only used and not seen as a person who should be respected and treated with dignity, honor, and kindness. The women also said that they loved the men and appreciated them and their talents. The women also said that they would honor and respect the men, but they wanted to be treated better too. They also wanted the men to talk to them respectfully and treat them as an equal and not as a possession or a toy. The men thought this was good, and they said that they would treat the women with respect and talk nice to them. This gave birth to the concept of romance. This led the men to talk very nice and kind toward the women, and this would show the women more love, respect, dignity, and romance. This would also give the women more of an equal status. Then the women showed respect and kind, and they helped the men and tried to do things to make them happy. Then the women told the men about the children that grew up to be monsters, and they asked for the men's help. The men tried to figure out what to do, and they decided to go to the one who was a murderous maniac first. Yet as soon as they started to talk to him, the guy started to get into fistfights and started to try to kill the men. The men tried all they knew what to do to try to stop the guy from killing them, but nothing stopped him, so the men of the tribe had to end his life. They apologized to the Creator God because they didn't want to end his life, but they absolutely didn't know what else to do. The Creator God said he understood and wouldn't hold it against them. This reminded them not to become murderous maniacs themselves, and they all agreed that they shouldn't become murderous maniacs. The men of the tribe then went to talk to the other boys to see if they could work something out with them. The one that argued started to argue with them at first, and they told him what they did to the boy who had been murdering others. The arguing boy then stopped arguing and thought about the situation because he didn't want them to end his life as well. They then told the young boy that they would help him learn to do things for himself, to support himself. They would teach him to raise crops on his own and hunt on his own. That way, he wouldn't need to argue with anyone because he could take care of himself. Supporting himself would also keep him so busy that he wouldn't have time to argue, and it would show everyone else that he could take care of himself. That way, there wouldn't need to be any arguments. The young guy would also gain respect once he could hunt on his own. The young guy thought about it and agreed that this would be the best thing to do. The men then went to the other young guy that was stealing everyone's food, and they told him the same thing. He didn't want the men to end his life either, and he thought it would be good for him to learn to raise crops and hunt on his own as well. As they taught him, and he worked in the fields and went on hunting parties, he got exercise and slimmed down. So he wasn't obese anymore, and he was gaining strength and talent at raising crops and hunting. Both of these young guys ended up gaining great talents and abilities, and ended up being great men. The other adults eventually saw them as good, productive members of the tribe. Then, after a while, even the young women found them to be desirable. This gave birth to men disciplining children by showing them skills and helping them get exercise. This helped the children gain self-discipline and skills to support themselves and supply their own needs. This showed everyone that men were needed and that good, stable husbands were to be desired. They were desired because they stabilized the tribe and helped everyone live peacefully and prosperously. This also helped the children do things on their own so they wouldn't be so difficult for the women to deal with. This kept the children disciplined, in good physical and mental health, and they stayed physically strong. It also helped the women live a good life that was peaceful, and it helped them keep their sanity because the children didn't constantly nag them or fight with them. It also helped the children grow up and be peaceful members of society. This gave honor to men, women, and children. It also made them all feel needed, loved, wanted, accepted, honored, respected, and cherished. So it might be a good idea to figure out how these lessons could apply to us these days. It would help all people if we learn ways to make sure all people in society have discipline and show respect and honor. Now, I'm single and having difficulty finding a marriage partner too. If you remember that I said that people who have big problems in this area had problems with childhood bullying, abuse, and betrayal, I'd rather not go into all the details, but I was bullied almost all the way through school. I had a physically abusive sibling as well. I constantly felt betrayed and like no one would ever help to stop the abuse and bullying. Consequently, almost every single attempt I ever had at a romantic relationship ended up being a terrible mess and just gigantic failures. So I just gave up after a while. Yet I've learned a lot of great stuff through the years, and I'm maturing. There's been a few things that have helped me mature through the years. Here's a list of those things. 1, I learned about God's love. Yet I then realized that almost all the people I knew didn't have the slightest clue about God's love. They vehemently rejected that notion and were verbally abusive about it. That leads me to point number 2. I got counseling for depression that all the verbal abuse had caused, and the counseling helped a lot. Number 3, the psychologist I was seeing recommended the book titled Boundaries by Dr. Townsend and Dr. Cloud. That book taught me good, healthy boundaries, and I put my foot down and told folks I wouldn't stand for the abuse any longer. That seemed to stop a lot of the abuse, so that helped a lot as well. Number 4, I started following several different dating and relationship coaches on YouTube over the last year or two. The first several coaches didn't really help me all that much. Yet I eventually found some that were psychologists, and they taught about different problems with relationship attachment styles. The attachment styles are how a person starts to feel attached to a person they have romantic feelings for as they start to interact with them. Learning about the difficult attachment styles helped a lot as well. Learning how both sexes think and what both seem to like and dislike has helped a lot too. I'm currently following 17 different dating and relationship coaches on YouTube, and at least 5 of them are psychologists. You might be very surprised at the coach that helped me learn the most about how men and women think. The coach always wears a mask in their videos to protect their identity and privacy. This person said they are now married, but she is Russian and used to be, well, a stripper. And no, she doesn't do any stripping in these videos. She actually wears a very modest outfit, a mask, and a wig that looks like long hair. She simply gives advice from her years of learning how men and women think, live, and what motivates them. I think it's safe to say this issue is no longer about a couple of nerdy guys having difficulty getting dates. It's a very big problem. It's gotten to the point where there seems to be strong feeling of angst on both sides. The conversations and debates have gotten so abrasive and caustic that many people are opting out of any and all types of dating. Both sides feel disrespected and like the other side refuses to listen to reasonable ideas they're talking about. This leads the people who study the issue to say that in 20 years, the number of single adults will jump from 31% to at least 43%. They also say that the numbers might jump into the 50-something percent range. This isn't just happening in the United States and Western countries, but from what I understand, it's happening worldwide. So it's occurring in many different countries and many different cultures. I'd like to bring this around to see this issue through the lens of God's love and see what can help with this problem. Here's a few things I've noticed that help. 1. Learn about God's love for all people. You can see this in books like He Loves Me by Wayne Jacobson and Pluriform Love by Thomas J. Ord. You might also look at the book Classic Christianity by Bob George, especially in chapter 11. Number 2, read books like The Boundaries book by Dr. Townsend and Dr. Cloud. Number 3, learn to negotiate and talk through these issues in a loving and kind-hearted manner, but uphold your own good and healthy boundaries as well. Number 4, if the conversation gets frustrating, then be honest and say it's frustrating, but try to remain kind-hearted in the way you say it. Then take a break for a moment and try to gather your thoughts, and then go discuss things a bit further. Try to work it out in a kind-hearted manner that is mutually beneficial if it's at all possible. Try to stay away from abrasive or harsh comments. Don't let the conversation become abrasive or caustic in a way that makes reconciliation nearly impossible. Try to keep guiding the conversation back to supporting a kind-hearted, mutually beneficial type of interaction and relationship. Number 5, try to say the difficult stuff and the stuff you view as non-negotiable at the beginning. Try to say up front that disrespect will not be tolerated. So let's all try to be respectful to each other. Don't worry if the person walks away. You were lonely to begin with, so if they walk away, you might be at ground zero, but at least you'll have your self-respect. Talk about religious beliefs up front at the start. Talk about your non-negotiable boundaries at the beginning of the conversation. Then, later on, you can talk about opinions and personal preferences. I'd also recommend listening to some of my favorite relationship coaches. The first is the woman who wears a gold mask in her videos. Her channel for helping guys is called Attract Girls with Your Russian Big Sister. Her YouTube handle is @TheMindOfWomen. She gives great common sense advice and insights into how men and women think. She also swears a little, so I'd give her a PG-13 or rated R rating. Her channel for helping women is called Your Russian Big Sister. The YouTube handle for that channel is @YourRussianBigSister. I can also tell you that there seems to be a good mixture of young adults and older adults that comment on those channels, so you don't need to worry about your age, but try to keep your privacy and don't give away personal details in the comments section. There's a couple of others who are professional psychologists and therapists. One of them is a woman named Ty Gibson, and she calls her channel Ty Gibson Personal Development School. The other one is a young woman who is a practicing therapist and a doctoral student who calls her channel Gentle Path Forward. Those folks have helped me learn a lot from multiple perspectives. I learned about issues from the effects of childhood bullies and common sense ways to interact with the opposite sex. I know that when I was in high school, I was a bit of a nerdy guy and I liked watching science fiction TV shows and movies. I've mostly grown out of that sort of thing, and I don't think about that type of stuff all day long anymore. Yet I do still have difficulty in the area of dating. A lot of that, as I've come to know, has to do with difficult issues. I mean, issues like childhood bullies, a family that didn't understand boundaries, a physically abusive sibling, and no one stopped the bullying from that sibling. The nearly constant physical abuse from that sibling left me feeling perpetually unsafe and betrayed. I felt like no one would ever help me feel safe or actually be safe from the abuse. Yet I was seeing a psychologist to deal with depression and some of that stuff. I've also gone through the Boundaries book and learned how to have good, healthy boundaries. So I've already lived through rebuilding my life and my personal stability. So now I'm moving on to maturity, and I'm looking forward to bigger and better things. Hopefully this will lead to some good things in the future. Now, folks, you know that on this show I try to point people back to getting to know God's love more and more. I'm not joking around when I talk about God's love. I'm not saying it as a catchphrase or using it like a cliche to promote my show. I really mean it when I say learning about God's love dramatically changed my life for the better. If I hadn't gotten to know God's love a few years ago, I most likely would have ended it all those years ago. So I know for a fact that getting to know God's love set me on track for healing, and that has greatly changed my life. It helps to know that you're loved, appreciated, and that you do have a purpose. That's why I would like to encourage you to get to know God's love, or ask God to do whatever it takes to help you get to know His love. So that's my encouragement to you. Try to learn about God's love as if it's the big, rich gold vein that's deep inside the mine shaft. Do whatever it takes to get to that gold. I guarantee you'll be glad you did. It'll upgrade your life as if you traded up from the old car that was just a clunker to something like a warp speed spaceship. It sure did that for me. I've noticed that as I've seen other people get to know God's love, it does similar things for them as well. The more they know about God's love and the more they surrender to it, the better it seems to be. That makes me so excited that I'm almost about to jump out of my seat and start shouting and cheering for people. I want to cheer for them like they won the championship game, because in a way, they did. So let's live out that type of excitement. I'm going to get out of here right now and go live it out right now. So at this time, I'll just say that I'm Lenny Manning, host of the Agape Guy Show, and I hope to see you in the next episode of the show. Goodbye for now.
I'm banking everything on love. I'm banking everything on love. I see the flags unfurl and they're blowing the other way. I see the anchor rising and the ship